Another twist in her metaphor-exhausting week tonight. One MP told the Prime Minister he admired her daring and was withdrawing his letter demanding a vote of no confidence in her leadership. He said the party was too close to the cliff edge. Earlier, another Tory MP sounded all too happy to give the PM a shove.
Could the Prime Minister inform the House at what point it was decided that Brexit means remain?
Prime Minister!
Can I say to my honourable friend, at absolutely no point, because Brexit continues to mean Brexit.
I hope so, the MP bit back.
I understand she's also criticised me for looking for a solution that is workable. I have to say I disagree with her on that. I think what we need is a solution that is going to work for the United Kingdom.
With only 3 months...
The Labour leaders said it was all proof the Tories were at war.
Isn't the case that the government is failing to negotiate Brexit, failing to meet the needs of the country because they are too busy, far too busy, fighting each other?
Let me tell the right honourable gentleman what I've been doing over the last week. And perhaps
Panicking, a Labour MP shouted. What she wasn't about to do was hang around for her former Foreign Secretary to make his resignation speech. The government made sure by the time he got to his feet, Mrs May was speaking to MPs at the other end of Parliament and didn't have to listen to this.
This is, in important ways, this is Bino or Brino or Brexit in name only. I'm, of course, unable to accept it, as I said, or to support it, as I said in the Cabinet session at Chequers. And I'm happy now to speak out against it and be able to do so. Mr. Speaker, it is not too late to save Brexit. We have time in these negotiations. We have changed tack once, and we can change again. The problem is not that we failed to make the case for a free trade agreement of the kind spelt out at Lancaster House. We haven't even tried. We must try now, because we will not get another chance to get it right.
He held back from a personal attack on the Prime Minister, but catalogued the mistakes he said the government had made under her leadership, including the betrayal of her original plan.
But let us, again, aim explicitly for that glorious vision of Lancaster House, a strong, independent, self-governing Britain that is genuinely open to the world, not the miserable, permanent limbo of Chequers.
It wasn't an epic, game-changing moment, but just as Downing Street is about to publish some myth-busting notes to rally support for the Chequers plan, Boris Johnson has helped to write the alternative pamphlet.
Ken
Got more authority than me.
No,
Ken?
his hearing's gone, obviously.
For some old stagers, still more proof the Tory party is in an extraordinary place.
It's never as bitter as this. In the past, when the Tory parties have fallen out, they behaved in a rather gentlemanly, kind way as rivals. Now they're enemies, and the language that is used by both sides is very damaging and painful.
Does it feel like that to you?
Well, it's certainly the worst I've ever seen, and I'm as bad, I'm as much a veteran as Ken. I remember we did have little troubles when Smithy in Rhodesia had support from Conservatives. Most of your viewers won't remember anything about that. And Maastricht was pretty bad, but not as bad as this.
Theresa May only heard what Boris Johnson had to say after her questioning session ended. He'd criticised a fog of self-doubt, wasted time, wrong turnings, putting down markers for what many think will be an autumn leadership challenge.
Order. And Gary's with me now here in Westminster. The backbench 1922 Tory MP committee has just been meeting, and Mrs May was in there.
That's right. We've talked before about how the Tory party is a party these days that tends to sort of meet in separate rooms, and this was largely a loyalist gathering with loyalist people speaking. Some of the dissidents, as it were, from the harder Brexit end of the party turn up, but they don't tend to use this as a forum to take swipes at Theresa May. Even her supporters said it was pretty sycophantic stuff in there tonight. But one extraordinary moment, which apparently, it was certainly to those who were in the room, looked as though it took Theresa May by surprise and wasn't totally choreographed. One MP got up, a man called Clarke, and said, I did put in a letter to the 22 committee chairman asking for a vote of no confidence in your leadership. I now apologise for doing that and am withdrawing the letter. And so that will have sent her away with a little skip in her step. And I think people in Number 10 are daring to think the Prime Minister will actually last in her job until at least September, which is a fairly extraordinary state of affairs when you think about it. But then after this week, maybe not.
Will Boris Johnson have perhaps eroded that skip?
I think he tried to put down a marker today and make sure that people knew he was there if they came looking for a leader, maybe September, October, not too far away. It was not one of his most grandiloquent performances, no soaring rhetoric, no personal attacks on the Prime Minister. It was perfectly clear who he was criticising for living in a fog of self-doubt and hesitating and U-turning, but he didn't actually go for her in the way, of course, that famous speech Sir Geoffrey Howe went for Margaret Thatcher. He knows that moment might come, but he doesn't want to be the one to wield the dagger, but he wants to be available and for people to know that he is there. At the end, when he sat down, there was a cry of, "Is that it?" from the folded arms loyalists who were sitting just across the gangway from him, unimpressed. But he hopes a few people noticed what he said today. What it has done, though, is give a script to the critics of Theresa May in her own party. She spent a sizable chunk of the last 2 days trying to talk to activists and tell them, I know you don't like this deal, but it isn't what you've been told, it's better than that. And she's now going to have to combat the script he's given them. And I understand she is going to go around the country doing speeches and putting out a myth-busting dossier to defend it.
Gary, thank you. Well, now joining us here on the Green is Nadim Zahawi. He backed Boris Johnson's campaign to be Conservative leader back in 2016. He's a minister in the government for children and families. Nadim Zahawi, you're in an interesting position. You're between an erstwhile rock and a foggy place. I mean, he's gone, Boris, and she's still there, but as he's described her, in the depths of fog. Where are you between the two of them?
Well, I think Boris described his view of where he thinks the Chequers agreement is at. I would say that actually the Chequers agreement is both pragmatic but also principled. If you look at what it says, we come out of the customs union, we come out of the single market, so we take back control of our borders and of course be able to do trade deals and of course our money. At the same time, and this was one of the messages that I think the Prime Minister actually made sure she delivered to the whole party, is we're making preparations for no deal if our European colleagues do not take this deal seriously. And you will see those preparations being made over the weeks and months to come in all departments across government. So I think, look, Boris has the Reagan-esque optimism, which is a good thing, but I think the deal that the Prime Minister has put forward is principled because it delivers on the principles of Brexit and is pragmatic.
But with respect, it's not the deal she put forward. 4 amendments have been put to it with which she bitterly disagrees.
Well, hold on a second. She went through each and every one of those amendments today in PMQs. 3 of those amendments were things that actually were government policy, and the 4th about how you collect money is also in the white paper. So this idea
why
that
is your man resigned
with,
then? Well, I mean, if it's government policy of old, why is he resigning?
All I would say is both people who voted Brexit. I voted for Brexit. I was a businessman before entering this place. I thought the EU was moving in the wrong direction, and it's right, if we couldn't reform it from within, as David Cameron tried, it's right to come out now.
And those who voted... If you're a businessman,
yes,
and you were, and you probably will be again...
I'm about to
but if you are, you're not going to like what's been published today. 5% fall in value in business.
Let me just get to that point. Both people who voted for Brexit and Remain, I've had a postbag from my constituents on both sides. Both are feeling uncomfortable. That means a
foggy,
compromise.
Perhaps,
no, not at all. Actually, if the Remainers and Brexiteers are feeling uncomfortable, it means, I think, we're getting close to a compromise, which is the right place to be.
But it's taken us 2 years to get here. There's only 9 months to go before the whole thing happens.
And we are making preparations, as the Prime Minister said, that if our EU colleagues, which at the moment they're taking the deal very seriously, and I'm pleased with that, because actually you've got to remember that this deal has to deliver for the 52% who voted to come out, which is why I think it's principled and it's doing all the things that we said we would do when we come out, but it's also pragmatic because it's actually delivering for the 48% who voted to remain. So that is where I think is you need to get to a place where both sides have to compromise, and I think we are at that place, and that's to be commended.
Right.
As a businessman, I sat on the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, and I can tell you that the best possible outcome on this is what the Prime Minister's proposing, which keeps us, basically trading as freely as possible whilst taking back control of our borders and, of course, of our money.
Nadim Sadawi, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now, in the House of Commons is the Conservative Remainer MP, Vicky Ford. Vicky Ford, you're an unapologetic and fairly fervent Remainer, and I'm wondering where you are tonight between...
I don't think fairly fervent. I think I also knew the problems with the EU as well. I've sat through all the discussions today, Prime Minister's question time, statement from Boris Johnson, and then 3 hours of debate later. What we heard from the Prime Minister, she clarified why the 4 amendments were accepted. And then we heard Boris make a short speech about his problems with the deal. Some of the issues that he raised have been immediately quashed actually by other EU countries, saying that actually he's oversimplifying some complicated problems. But what I've heard again and again from the sort of middle of the Conservative Party is people saying this is a pragmatic solution, let's get on with negotiating this. What I've heard from the Labour Party is they've said all the problems that they think we will have negotiating it, but they haven't actually said whether or not, if this deal is delivered, whether or not they'd vote for it, which is adding huge uncertainty to the situation.
A number of your colleagues today have said that that Rees-Mogg, Mr. Rees-Mogg, is now running the country.
I don't think that's what I saw or felt when I was sitting behind the Prime Minister at PMQs today. She was pretty feisty, and I understand she went down very well in the 1922 committee, although I was in the chamber listening to the debate. I mean, the one thing that I think, and I've done nearly 10 years of European negotiations, it would really, really help if some members of the Labour Party would be clear, if this negotiation goes through and delivers a deal along the lines of the White Paper, will they vote for it? Because that's actually really important. It's important to know if they would vote for it both here and when it goes to the European Parliament.
Well, Vicky Ford, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, also with us here is Labour MP John Mann. He backed the government's Brexit bill last night. He was one of the 4 Labour MPs who voted with the government. His critics say he effectively bailed out Theresa May's premiership. John Mann, it is a rare condition to be in, to be the man who saved a Tory Prime Minister from almost certain defenestration.
Well, there's close votes every 5 minutes on Brexit, and the government lost one by 4, it won one by 6. On Monday, it won 2 by 3, and we've had plenty more close votes. So that's part of Boris Johnson's spin. He's got a full election campaign on, not a general election. The Boris campaign to replace Theresa May, and that's now on full tilt.
It's very easy to talk about the shenanigans in the Conservative Party. It's less easy to divine what on earth the Labour Party is doing. I mean, you may be somebody who definitely does not want to be in the European Union, but where's your party?
Well, hopefully with me, which is...
Well, they're not, because they didn't vote with you last night.
Well, let's see when it comes to if there is a good deal, and a good deal is defined as one that protects manufacturing industry, such as the car industry, aerospace, that has a deal on immigration. If that's what I classify as a good deal, if that's what's on offer from the EU and Theresa May, then that'll be relatively easy to vote for. If it's not what's on offer, it's going to be impossible to vote for.
But you see, what perplexes people is that we've been living with the Brexit decision by the referendum for 2 years, and we seem to be absolutely no further forward. Everyone's arguing about, and now it's got to a point where a Labour MP, 4 of you, has to save the Prime Minister in order to even keep it alive. It would probably have died without your help.
Well, I'm not in the business of saving the Prime Minister. I'm in the business of ensuring that the 70% in my constituency and most Labour constituencies in the north of England who voted for Brexit get the Brexit that they want to see. And the public's bemused. Why has it taken so long? What on earth has Boris Johnson...
Tell me, you're an MP.
Boris Johnson, David Davis, they've been pulling the salary to negotiate. They've clearly been sat on their hands doing very little.
Well,
then they walk away at the end of it. Those negotiations, though, will happen because, of course, it's not just in our interests, it's in the interests of the European Union.
9 months is totally unrealistic. They'll have to go for a much longer extension, won't they? I mean, there is so much to be done.
There's a lot to be done, but who knows what will be negotiated in the next few months. I believe in getting down and doing the business, and the quicker that's done, the better for the country. Get on with it, get out of the European Union, but not sacrificing our manufacturing industry to do so.
Well, how do you know you won't be doing that?
Well, that depends what the deal is. But a frictionless trade deal,
at the moment,
a frictionless trade deal will protect the car industry, protect aerospace, protect manufacturing. That's what I want to see. I don't want to see...
Well, they're already taking a 5% hit, and down go the figures as time goes by. Everybody's under siege.
Well, the big hit will be if we walk away with no deal and put car prices up 10%, food prices up 30%. That'll be the bad news. I won't be supporting that, but I think a good deal will be good for Britain, and it's what people voted for, don't forget.
One very quick question on another matter, which was that Margaret Hodge, one of your very respected MPs, called your leader a racist. In fact, a stronger word than that. Is she right, or should she be disciplined?
Well, absolutely she shouldn't be disciplined. You know, MPs should be outspoken. She's a feisty individual, and we've all a lot to learn from her. Many things. She's a great woman.
Break out the emergency number 10, Merlot. Effing phew was the reaction here to the government's survival by 6 votes last night, helped by party chairman Brandon Lewis. He completely forgot he had an arrangement with an opposition MP, the Lib Dem new mum, Jo Swinson, that neither would vote. Easily done, Brandon. Easily done. But oh no, it's her again, Ms Soubry. She's calling for a government of national unity. Last time that happened, it was a case of all behind you, Winston. But Churchill's grandson, the mighty Nicholas Soames, might have to wait for a tap on the shoulder. Mr Corbyn will have none of it. At the same time, in Dublin, the Taoiseach tells the Irish to prepare for no deal, saying, "It's not evident or not obvious that the government of Britain has the majority for any form of Brexit, quite frankly. Don't worry, Theresa May is on her way to the Irish border later this week to sort it all out." There are 254 days to Brexit. Chin-chin. Well, a short time ago, I spoke to the former Deputy Prime Minister and Conservative grandee, Lord Heseltine. I asked him where he saw Brexit going and whether crashing out of the European Union was a real possibility.
Well, that is the danger. That is a disaster economically to this country. But I think that public opinion is moving. I think that Mr. Trump's visit helped. Anyone who thinks that this is an ally who's going to suddenly turn up trumps and deliver the British economy. The same week we get the European Union signing a free trade deal with Japan. What's all this fuss about? Why aren't we in that umbrella gaining from the strength of the European partnership?
The question is how we get from here to where people like you believe we should be.
Well, I think it needs the government to say that they've tried to find a negotiation. They put Boris Johnson, David Davis and Liam Fox in charge. They've completely failed to come up with any credible version of a future. And the time has come to say, look, we've done our best. Let the British people decide again. Put the issue back to another referendum or a general election.
Michael Heseltine talked to me earlier. Now, joining us here is the Times columnist, Matthew Parris, and commentator Aisha Hazarika. Matthew Parris, where on earth are we? I mean, I know we're here on Westminster Green, but do we know anything else for certainty?
No, we're in a hell of a mess, and it's not clear there's any version of Brexit that could get past Parliament, but we have a breathing space for the summer now. The government squeaked through that trade bill division, and probably nothing much will happen except a lot of sabre rattling over the next couple of months.
That, in fact, if anybody wants to deliver anything about Brexit, is pretty alarming, Aisha, not least because Parliament was going to, in fact, wrap itself up this week. You would have thought that, given that we've wasted so much time getting to this point, with only 9 months to go, we ought to be hard at work.
Well, I think the public will look at what's happening right here behind us with just, shock and dismay. These are the people we're meant to, shirt sleeves up, let's strain every sinew to get everything sorted out, and we're nowhere near that. And I think as more clarity comes about Brexit, we realise it's proving to be I think, impossible. I think there's a political impasse now. And I wasn't keen on the idea of a second referendum, but I sort of think this is the only way you're going to unblock this political kind of logjam that we've got to now.
Matthew?
It isn't laziness and it isn't incompetence by MPs, ministers or anybody else. It's just that there are different versions of Brexit in different people's minds and they simply can't agree which, and that there is therefore no majority for one version or another. And the second problem is that an idea of Brexit was sold by the Leave campaign, which is simply not deliverable. And it's all very well saying it's the will of the people, but the people could will that pigs could fly, but they can't fly, and the Brexit they wanted can't be delivered.
But aren't these therefore the circumstances in which you would say this is such an emergency, and that I don't think is an overstatement. I mean, of course, the Taoiseach, as I reported, actually thinks that we will crash out. I mean, if that is the case, should not people be saying goodbye to the beach and stick at it now and work it out for the next 3 months and come back with a solution?
I would agree with you, but that is, again, that's a pragmatic approach, but throw in politics into it and it's a whole different category, because in a way, if you're the Labour Party, why do you want to go in and help Theresa May in any way? Because this is sort of her problem. If you're Theresa May winning that vote by the skin of your teeth last night, that was a sort of stay of execution. She's hoping that now we'll go into the summer recess, the heat will subside from this issue and it will just buy her some more time. Remember, we've had a hot couple of weeks, you know, tempers are all up. They're waiting for the kind of blood to go down, but that doesn't solve the bigger issue of what is going to happen with the details of Brexit and how are we going to take it to the EU.
Well, tell me something, Matthew. You know about all these things and how they all work. Are there, in fact, clever diplomats, clever people below the surface actually doing the negotiation now, and they'll come back to the politicians and say, look, here's a way forward?
Well, they have, and it's something like the Chequers agreement. The Chequers agreement won't stand as it is, but it's a beginning. That's what the clever people have come up with. And it's all very well to say MP should stay, but if the people have voted for pigs to fly, there's not a lot of point in asking MPs to stay behind at Westminster and work out how pigs are going to fly, because they aren't.
As we know that pigs don't fly and can't fly, effectively, Matthew seems to be saying this is a forlorn enterprise.
Well, it does feel like we are in a genuine political crisis over this, because it is stuck. And today, Boris Johnson, in his resignation speech, you know, sort of indicated, look, you know, he might do things differently. We must have courage. We must have passion. That's not the solution to this. It is, as Danny Dyer said, a mad riddle.
OK, well, what about government of national unity to get us out of all this?
I don't think you need to go as far as that. I think you just need sensible people in the Conservative Party, which is a majority of them, and sensible people in the Labour Party, which is a majority of them, to talk about cooperating. But that would require the Conservative Party to rely for support on the Labour Party, and that would take leadership. And Tories don't like that kind of thing, but they must understand that this is in the national interest.